Welcome, everyone. This week, we're going to talk about COVID bad habits because there have been so many. And some of the shocking statistics about substance abuse, about weight changes, especially in young people, are really just out of control. And last time we did spring cleaning for your mind, and now it's about forming different habits that serve you rather than hurt you. And it's been a hard time. It's been a time of anxiety and worry and isolation and being upset.
Yeah.
But there are ways to handle it, and there are ways to handle it.
Right. I agree with this. And substances are a big part of this, the bad habits, but there are other bad habits. We're going to talk about those as we go along. So,
especially around food and
and thinking.
Netflix.
Right. It's just allowing yourself to give in to whatever whim you have to comfort yourself.
It's actually, when you allow yourself to do that, it's like giving in to a behaviorally disordered child.
You wouldn't let a child run through your house like marking on the walls. So why do you allow your internal child, if you will, to just, throw temper tantrums and get everything they want? And no, you got to put some discipline around it.
I remember I have this patient, and when I really got down to why he wasn't eating right and drinking too much, it was, I want
what I want when I want it. I knew you were going to say that. I don't even know who you're talking about, but I knew you were going to say that.
I want what I want when I want it.
But the truth is, do you really? Because then you get what you want when you want it and you're not happy. If you don't have discipline in your life, I love Jim Rohn's saying, we all suffer from one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And it's one of my favorite expressions, because if you don't have discipline in your life, you are going to have regret. Period.
You guys should write that down. You either suffer from the pain of discipline or the pain of regret.
Yeah, he's got some of the best quotes I've ever read, and that's one of my all-time.
And then hashtag Brain Warriors Way podcast. Post it on any of your social media sites. I know I talk about that a lot, but as we're growing this brain revolution, as we're growing the Brain Warriors Way podcast, it's just so important to spread the message.
Well, and leave us a review, and we will, if we read it, we will enter you into a drawing to win one of our books. Either Your Brain is Always Listening, a signed copy actually of Your Brain is Always Listening, or my book, The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, which is my memoir. So one of these two books. So yeah, share this, pass it on. We would just, we'd love to hear from you guys.
So let's talk about marijuana. It's such a hot topic, and we get so much hate mail when we talk about it. And I often say, I just have no dog in the fight.
I do, but we're not going into that.
I have no dog in the fight. In fact, if you smoke, I'm more likely to see you than if you don't.
So it helps business.
It helps business. But using marijuana before the age of 18 significantly increases the risk of depression, suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts, and anxiety disorders in young adults.
And if you're vulnerable, doesn't it increase your risk of psychosis like 400%?
450%. Those actually two studies out of Norway. And so I just did a Dr. Phil episode of a girl who did marijuana and then just was never the same. Now, it doesn't happen for everyone.
Right, of course.
But if you're vulnerable, and for me, when I was a teenager and one of my best friends showed me grass for the first time, I've had a healthy dose of anxiety. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Well, how is that going to help you? Oh man, it'll help you feel good. And yeah, maybe feel good now, but not later, versus now and
Well, I remember
later.
I tried it for the first time when I was a senior in high school, and because I got talked into it, sort of. I never really had an interest because of the craziness in my family. And I ended up trying it, and I was miserable. First of all, I sat like a bump on a log. People laughed at me because I guess I acted or looked stupid. I don't know which one it was, probably both. But all I did was eat. And I'm like, why would I do this? Why would I want to sit here and eat all day? No, this is not happening. It felt miserable. Like I hated it, but
Well, and it doesn't mean there are not some medicinal uses
100%.
for marijuana for people who have cancer that helps them eat. There's some evidence with glaucoma. There's evidence with
Pain.
children who have seizure disorders. So that's not what we're talking about. But New York just legalized recreational use. And, I'm not a fan of Xanax. I'm not a fan of alcohol. And I'm not a fan of marijuana. And they all have the same reasons. But when I published, I think the largest imaging study ever done on 62,454 scans, marijuana was the lifestyle habit that prematurely aged the brain faster than alcohol, faster than nicotine, faster than anything else. It also disrupts the brain's maturation process during the teenage. The brain is undergoing rapid development. It's a process called myelinization, where the nerve cells get wrapped with a white fatty substance called myelin. It's sort of like insulation on copper wires. And smoking or ingesting marijuana disrupts that process. And often you'll hear in drug treatment centers that if a person started smoking pot or doing drugs when they were 16, even though they went into the treatment center at 30, emotionally, they're still 16.
Certainly true with some of my family members who were addicts.
Reduces blood flow to the brain. I published another study on 1,000 cannabis users, showed overall decreased blood flow to the brain. Now people go, but is it better than alcohol? And I'm like, why are we having this discussion?
Why are we comparing?
Because they're both not good for you. And so now they seem both to be socially acceptable, but a lot of bad things for you, including the hot fudge brownie is socially acceptable, but not good. If you're going to
sugar is actually one of the worst things for your brain.
If
so
you're going
let's
to be
be clear.
A brain warrior,
right?
You're thinking, what do I love that loves me back? Mm-hmm. I had to deal with family this week with a grandparent with dementia. And it's like the chronic stress is just unremitting in that family. And the woman just felt like she was a bad person because she could no longer watch her 24/7, her mother. And so she had to go into a care facility, and she just felt awful.
Yeah.
And I said, the number one lesson that comes out of this is you need to take care of your own brain. So your children
don't have the
same experience you're having now. Know better, do better.
Mm-hmm. And during this period of COVID, I mean, anxiety is so high. It's not like we don't understand why people are struggling with, increased alcohol, marijuana, it's not like we don't understand why it's happening. Even opiates are way up. The use and addiction to opiates has gone way up. It's not like we don't understand why. It's just we want to talk about, these bad habits that are happening during COVID. It's not like they're going to just go away when all of a sudden things open up. That's the problem. So it's not like you can just get away with, most people cannot get away with like, oh, while I'm stressed, I'm going to do this. And then I'm just going to stop doing it. That's not really how it works. So if you don't have a little bit of discipline around this, or develop some other habits to replace those bad habits, like do something else instead, then that's where you get yourself in trouble.
When people are isolated and alone, what else can they do?
So I'm a fan of like finding other things to replace it, like I just said. So find a tea that you really like, learn how to meditate. I mean, these are things that you need to figure out. When it comes to, I mean, obviously when you're using substances, you're trying to alter your state. So really things like meditation are really helpful for that. For me, exercise is huge. So when COVID first started, I was exercising like crazy. And then I felt myself starting to taper off and get a little lazy with it and like exercise with less intensity. And I felt my mood change. So but I caught myself, as you get more disciplined and as you have more structure in your life, you start to notice when those things happen. And that's what I mean by having some discipline around it, because how you move matters as well. When you move with intensity, when you move with purpose, when you do like burst type training, you're going to get a very different feeling in your body and in your mood than if you are just walking at like 2 miles per hour. Not the same thing. Now, if walking at 2 miles per hour for you is very strenuous, it's very stressful, it's the only thing you can do, good, then make that your thing. But if you're a healthy individual, you need to increase your intensity.
So GABA calming could be an alternative.
Absolutely.
If you're feeling
That's what I use that a lot.
And it helps you.
Sleep.
Be nicer.
And sleep. And say no less.
And be nicer.
Yeah. Well, you like that I say no less, for sure.
Yes, I do. So when we come back, we're going to talk about more of the COVID bad habits. Leave us a comment, question, or review at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. When you do, we'll enter you into a drawing to win one of our books. And write down what you learned and post it on any of your social media sites and hashtag Brain Warriors Way Podcast.
Welcome back. We are talking about COVID bad habits this week. And before we get started, we want to ask you if you would please share this episode, tag us, tell us something you learned. We would love to hear from you. Also, if you leave us a review, we will actually enter you into a drawing. If we read your review, it'll enter you into a drawing for one of our books, a signed copy of either The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child or Your Brain is Always Listening. You get to choose. So, but as we go into this week, we want to talk about more COVID bad habits. We talked about substances in the last one, particularly marijuana and alcohol, but those aren't the only bad habits.
Well, and I have something to read. I just got a text from the chief of police for Newport Beach, John Lewis, who's a friend of mine. We've been working with the Newport Beach Police Department to create a brain healthy police department. Actually, in May, I'm going to do an all-day training. We're going to start training trainers, police officers, to create brain healthy police departments.
Probably one of the best things we
really
could do.
Excited.
Yeah.
So John sent me this text. The best April Fool's Day prank. A pink donut box was put out in the break area with a veggie plate inside. A little police humor for you. Hope
that's great
as well. I
I'm like,
love
what's wrong with that?
I love that so
that's awesome.
much. That's hysterical.
It's great.
And I'm just so proud of them because they're like getting it. and being able to have fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
With it. I remember when I first went to the police department and I said, so is it true you guys are sort of famous for getting free donuts and eating them? He said, oh no.
And then we did a tour and there was donuts. And we were like, what?
There were donuts in the meeting room.
Yeah.
All right. So other bad
so
habits.
I'm gonna name a few of my pet peeves during COVID that are bad habits. Reading death tolls every day. It's a bad habit. I don't like it. I don't like hearing about death tolls, death numbers every single day because it focuses you on negativity. So focus on some of the positive things. For me, turning the news on and focusing on all the craziness because it's not real. Even the headlines, even when the content, some of the content might be real, the way it's spun or the way it's read on the news is not accurate. So focusing on that for me just spins me into like craziness. So I stopped listening to the news. Those are bad habits, allowing yourself to get out of check, allowing your mood to like be dictated by numbers, by news, by you not having control of how you respond and react to something. That's a bad habit. Sitting around too often, watching Netflix, moving like a slug instead of moving with intention and purpose. Those are things that are COVID bad habits because they affect your mood. They affect everyone in your family.
So news consumption, that I guess social media would go along with that. It's been a double-edged sword because it's how people have stayed connected with other people, which is critical. Not being intentional with the food you eat. And this is often, people have ADD have a much harder time with their diets. There's actually a higher incidence of obesity in people who have ADD
because they're more impulsive.
They're not planners.
Right.
They often start thinking about food when they're hungry, as opposed to planning it out throughout the day or throughout the week. And so if you have ADD, get it treated. And, I just always say, just see it as a problem to solve, because it can be so helpful, because bad food habits have caused 40% of the population to gain significant weight.
Yeah, and that affects your mood.
And the average in millennials will horrify you.
Yeah, it's above the 19. We said COVID-19 initially. It's way above that now.
41 pounds.
Yeah.
So 20% of the population has lost weight, often because some people, when they get stressed, stop eating. But 40% of people have gained weight. And the ripple of that effect is going to be seen for years and years.
And one more that I think is really important is watch your language. Your language matters. Your brain does not have a sense of humor. It sort of lives out what you tell it to. So if you use language that's disempowering, that's going to matter. So when I hear people saying, oh, it's a pandemic world, that really bothers me because it's like, and then they'll go on to talk about all the negativity with the pandemic. We've had pandemics in this world over and over and over many times in the past. Yeah, not in our generation, but we've had many of them. It's not a pandemic world. It's a pandemic we're living in. It's going to end. We're going to move on. Think about your language and how you use it. Is it disempowering or is it empowering? And be careful with it. Put some discipline around it.
Words matter.
Words matter.
Yeah. No, we often, when our nieces first came to be with us, there was a lot of negative words about themselves, about their family.
We hear a lot less of that now.
There's a lot.
Well, but we discipline it.
And discipline, we don't beat them.
No. Discipline means to teach.
Is we just help them correct it.
Right.
We live around here. And so today, it's the first time on the set, you've actually seen the anteaters behind us. ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin your day. And you don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. And you absolutely should not say everything you think.
I get a lot of comments on this well, if I'm drawing boundaries and I'm using my voice, then how do I not say everything I think? There's a big difference. Okay. Drawing boundaries and using your voice to protect yourself. That's protecting yourself in situations that are harmful, where you need to stand up for yourself in order to protect yourself. Saying every dumb thing you think is going to ruin your relationships. Those are two very different. Yeah. Those are different things. So be clear that one will ruin your relationships. The other one will save your life.
Well, and I always think of these words, then what? If I say this, well, then what happens?
And
if I do this, then what happens? And just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true or whether or not you should say it.
Yeah.
And, thoughts come from all sorts of places. They come from your genes. Yeah. You talked about in The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. You were preparing for the pandemic for 3 generations.
And I'm not going to stop.
But thoughts come from your mom's voice, your dad's voice, your stepfather's voice, your schoolmates, your friends, your enemies, the news, movies. Just because you have a thought, it's important to evaluate it before you let it out of your mouth. And I often get crazy thoughts, and most of the time I don't say them, because it's like, well, will this get me what I want with Tana? Or will it get me what I want with the girls?
Yeah. I have a fun example of this. So I didn't really notice it, but Chloe picked up on it. She noticed it. So my daughter's getting ready to go to college, and we've been, preparing for this. And I'm just nervous as can be that she's going to be, and she noticed something. She's like, I noticed something. She goes, you're actually a pretty cool mom with most things, except for driving. You have some weird hang up about me driving places. And I never really caught on to it. And she's like, she said to me, she goes, you need to go get therapy because you're reliving your trauma through me and you're affecting my life. And I was like, what? But you know what? When I thought about it, not only did I get into a really, really bad car accident when I was 25 that could have, for all intents and purposes, killed me. I was a trauma nurse. I mean, I watched this day after day after day, scraping, people trying to put them back together, watching them die. And my best friend's daughter was killed in a car accident. And so it never occurred to me, but she picked up on it. She's like, you need to go do therapy because you are taking it out on me and you're affecting my life. So you have to think about this.
Well, but that's also part of that is her trying to make you feel bad so she can get what you want, because she's really bright. Because the fact is, I don't have those same traumas, and I didn't let my kids drive until I thought they were ready. And for one of them, it was 17 and
right,
a half.
But you actually had said she could go somewhere, and I was freaked out about it.
Yeah.
And you were like, that's not rational. You're the one who made the comment
that
it's not rational.
Not rational.
No, so that was where it came from. Was she's like, even Daniel knows, like, you're not rational with your thoughts around driving for me.
I think we should be protecting our teenagers. Anyways, what did you learn? COVID bad habits from marijuana, alcohol, overeating, staying up too late, not sleeping, death tolls, watching the news,
correcting your thinking.
Allowing the negative thoughts, the ants, to come and stay. You need to move those bad boys on. Mm-hmm. So write it down. Post it on any of your social media sites, what you learned. # Brain Warriors Way podcast. We would be so grateful. Leave us a comment, question, or review at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. We're going to read questions coming up. In the next session, we're going to do Brain in the News, brand new study out that got me walking even faster this morning. Stay with us. You're in a war for the health of your brain. Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Amen, founder of Amen Clinics and Amen University. My wife Tana and I created the Brain Warriors Way course. It's 26 hours of content where we walk you through how to have a better brain and a better life. If you want to survive and thrive, you have to become a brain warrior. Welcome back. Today, we're going to do Brain in the News and talk more about COVID bad habits. And one of them is being sedentary. Mm-hmm. It's, glued to the TV and not getting outside. So your vitamin D level goes down and not exercising. Well, brand new study came out that actually showed brisk walking improves brain health and thinking, and helps with memory. So according to a year-long study of people who had mild cognitive impairment, so they're already struggling. Mm-hmm. In the study, middle-aged and older people with early signs of memory loss raised their cognitive scores after they started walking 5 times a week. Regular exercise also amplified healthy blood flow to their brains. The changes in their brains and minds were consequential, the study concludes, and could have implications not just for those with serious memory problems, but for any of us whose memories are starting to fade. And there's another interesting study that shows if you're 80 and you walk 3 miles an hour, you have a 90% chance of living till you're 90. But if you're 80 and you're only walking a mile an hour, you have a 90% chance you are not going to live until you're 90. So I often say, walk like you're late.
Yeah, it's funny though. I think it's important to know you because that's fine. Walking for me is nice. But I know my brain, I need intensity. To feel normal, I need more like HIIT type training. So that bursting type training. So it's important to know that because my mood changes almost instantly.
And HIIT or high intensity training has actually been shown to do so many good things for your brain and body. And so if you're a walker, I'm a walker and a ping pong player. If you're a walker, walk as fast as you can for 30 to 60 seconds and then go back to a normal pace, but a normal fast
or sprint pace. If you can, and then stop.
And we've been going to the gym morning 3 days a week. Right. You've been torturing me, feeling muscles I haven't felt.
It's so decades. Good for you. I want to keep you around with me.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure after the first couple of times if you were trying to kill me or not. I'm like, I wonder if she's trying to get rid of you. She's sane. She's trying to keep you around.
You're trying to sit down. He's like, my butt hurts so bad.
So doing all these squats and
it's good. And then I do jump rope in between or burpees or something like that to keep the heart rate up.
So move. I mean, we say this over and over again. Brain warriors are fit.
Yep.
And it's not my natural tendency. My dad always hated when I said I come from a family of fat people. I have a brother and sister, both 150 pounds overweight, I nudged them, and then I went, wait a minute, I care more about this than you do, right. Which is not good. But, I have the genetic vulnerability and, I look at a piece of cake and gain a pound. So I have to be really intentional.
And for me, it's more than about weight. I don't feel normal. I just don't feel right if I don't exercise. My mood immediately starts to I just get brain fog. I feel more negative. I'm not as happy.
There are just so many benefits to this. The next study we want to talk about is really important. Bartonella, which is one of the Lyme co-infections, is linked to schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
Of 17 patients with schizophrenia, 12 had Bartonella DNA in their blood, compared to only 1 of 13 in a control group. According to the questionnaires, both patient and controls reported similar pet ownership and flea exposure, because that transmits Bartonella, as does ticks, can also do
Well,
it.
I think that's
but
what
it's
they're-
this idea that if you're experiencing a psychotic thought process, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, a brief psychotic episode, somebody should look at your brain, because if you don't look, you don't know. I say that all the time. If you don't look, you don't know. And it's just critical to go, why? Not to go, oh, you have schizophrenia. Schizophrenia tells you what it is. It doesn't tell you what causes
Right.
it. It's like depression tells you what it is, but it doesn't tell you what causes
Exactly.
it. And if you don't know the cause, then you can't properly treat it. And that's why people often feel hopeless when someone gets diagnosed with schizophrenia. It's like, oh, they're going to have this the rest of their life, but you don't know what's causing it. And that is critical. If you take a map of the United States and you look at the highest incidence of schizophrenia, it's
almost identical.
It's the Northeast, the North, Midwest, and the West Coast. And then you look at the highest incidence of Lyme,
they almost overlap perfectly.
Almost identical. Yeah. And so it just means somebody should look and evaluate you to see whether or not you've had an infectious process in the brain. Another thing in the news has been these mass shootings, Atlanta, Boulder, Colorado, and then just recently in Orange, not very far from our house. And there was an editorial in USA Today that basically said mental illness has nothing to do with
how would you possibly say that?
And it just blows me away that
anybody who does
who does something like that has a brain and a mind that is clearly not working right. And of course, there's always an element of choice. I used to think free will was black or white. You either had it or you didn't. But when you look at the scans that we have, it's gray. You know, most of us, I think, have about 80% free will. Give you a 6-pack of Michelob and you have 50% free will.
Some meth and...
But if you're starting with a troubled brain and then give somebody meth or alcohol or other things, they don't have much.
And let's be clear, that does not mean that they should have an excuse to go. That is
they
not.
Don't get to go home.
No.
Right, because
I'm huge on accountability. You need to protect the innocent.
Well, we need to protect our society
first.
That's primary. But if they acted badly because of a damaged organ, most people go to jail, go home. So wouldn't we want to rehabilitate the organ of behavior, which is the brain? So I think both of us we agree that the number one thing to do is protect the innocent and protect society. But we should also be evaluating and treating the people who do bad things, because most people go to jail, go home. And if you can decrease recidivism, then you're making a positive impact on our society. So with that, in the next episode, we're going to answer some of your questions. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are answering questions today. This is episode 4 of this week, and we love it when you send us questions. We love it when you leave us reviews. In fact, we will enter you into a drawing if we read your review. You'll get a signed copy of either my book, The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, or Daniel's new book, Your Brain is Always Listening. You get to choose.
About the dragons from the past that breathe fire on your emotional brain. Here is the ancestral dragon.
So we would love it if you would tell us what you learned, screenshot it, tag us, tag, people who might benefit from this. And yeah, we're going to answer your questions now.
Let's do it.
So I like this question. If an environment, because it hits close to home for me. If an environment like a home has been a place of trauma, then what are some mind tools to develop in order to heal from the trauma while still living in the home? The daily face of being and seeing the things that reminds us of those traumas. The home brings up on the daily, the memories. That's interesting because I grew up in a traumatic, with a lot of trauma and a lot of chaos in my home. And I still notice the triggers, even though it's not even the same house, but some of the same triggers are there. So for example, my mother moved, but there are still certain triggers when I go to see her. And so even though my mom, is like one of the heroes in my book, the environment was chaotic when I was growing up. And so when I go to her house, there are just certain things in that house that are just like they were when I was a kid in a different house, and it triggers me. The difference is now I'm aware of it. I think awareness, getting EMD therapy,
EMDR.
EMDR therapy was really helpful to me. So helping me process that trauma so that I'm now aware of it. I can still feel myself starting to get anxious, but I know either when to remove myself or at least step back, do a prayer, meditation, those types of things when I start to feel that way. And just recognizing it is helpful.
Well, and there are also probably good things that happened. And if you can bring your mind, so know when you're triggered or cued, know when it comes up. And then with my patients, I'm always talking about be curious, not furious. Learn about it. And then when you see a trigger, therapy like EMDR can be helpful. Havening, which we talked about before. I mean, just something as simple when you get triggered to rub your hands together like this or stroke down your hands from opposite shoulders can just be so helpful to begin to drain the negative emotional energy from that place and then consciously put a more positive or happy memory, because at your home with your mom, you had lots of happy memories. Why are you looking at me like that?
Because it wasn't until I wrote my book that I actually was able to come up with them.
Interesting. Because so the negative memories actually
they crowded out. They completely put just this dark cloud over everything else. And it wasn't until I was writing that all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. And I started to remember some of the positive things. So one of my suggestions was going to be to write down your story.
So helpful. And in Your Brain Is Always Listening, there are actually directions on how to do that.
Yeah.
All right. What is the effect from a few years of heartbreak, trauma, and distress and disappointment on your brain? Well, I know more about this than I want to.
Stress hormones are not good.
So when you have your heart broken, cortisol spikes and it stays high.
Yeah.
And it actually shrinks the cells in your hippocampus, which can negatively impact your mood and your memory. And so you just don't think right. And if you're not thinking right, your decision-making is not as good as it can be. And so putting brain healthy habits is critical. Sometimes taking a little bit of oxytocin can really help with heartbreak. Using good supplements like serotonin mood support or happy saffron, GABA calming, all of those can help rebalance your brain and be helpful to you. So yes, grief can have a lasting impact on brain function. In Your Brain Is Always Listening, there's actually the Grief and Loss Dragon talk about how to tame. And that one gets tamed by fixing sleep first. And often, just like you said with the other question, journaling what happened and then correcting the story, because often there's a whole bunch of ants.
Well, and sometimes we get stuck on heartbreak because we only remember the good things that we miss. And if there's heartbreak, then it means that there were some bad things too. So it's really important to be realistic about why the relationship ended, what was wrong in the relationship. Be realistic. You don't need to go overboard and make it something it wasn't, but write down the things that were wrong in the relationship. Be realistic about it, because you to recall and remember and realize, maybe it's time to move on.
The next question is best ways to focus my brain. I need to follow through with tasks instead of jumping on to the next one.
ADD?
Could be, or it could be you have your gadgets on when you're trying to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And often it's great if you turn off your email or put them on airplane mode so that you're not constantly being distracted. Mm-hmm. With my executive team, every morning I have a huddle for 20 minutes. And I often recommend you do that with yourself. Just go, so what did I do yesterday? And what's the one thing I want to accomplish today? And do that first. And the more you focus, the more you're going to be able to focus. And then know your ideal time for doing things. For some people, it's first thing in the morning. For other people, it's later in the afternoon. And get things done that fit your circadian rhythm.
For me, it's morning.
Next question. I have a remarkable bipolar 1 brain, and Amen Clinics has scanned it twice. I'm curious if the brain has ever been scanned during a manic episode or psychosis. Many times. And often we see too much activity in the deep structures of the brain, basal ganglia, thalamus, insular cortex. It's sort of like a storm, but their thoughtful brain is sleepy during those times, so they can't control the emotional storm.
Interesting.
Dr. Amen, you've spoken before about the poor effects of marijuana to the hippocampus. Once a person stops use, is it possible to improve that area of the brain? The answer is yes. I mean, that's sort of the cool thing. The hippocampus is one of the few areas of the brain that continues to make new cells throughout life. And once you stop poisoning it, it's much more likely to rebound and be healthier.
Yeah. Excellent.
You want to read the last one?
My 18-year-old daughter has severe anxiety. Where do I start to get her on the road to freedom and a healthy, happy life? That is just so hard when our teenagers, this is.
And it's so common.
Especially right now. Yeah. I think a lot of, if they're vulnerable already, they're being triggered like crazy, because we've got a couple of those in our house, the kids that are anxious. So we've been going through lots and lots of serotonin, mood support, and GABA.
And happy saffron.
Yes, lots.
So take the brain health assessment, brainhealthassessment.com. Know what type of brain the teenager has, maybe type 5, which is cautious brain. And we'll recommend the particular supplements that might be helpful. Clearly, things like hypnosis, meditation,
that's one of the things
diaphragmatic breathing, exercise. But you also want to check their important health numbers. If their thyroid's off, that could be a problem. One of the kids I treated recently had high levels of mold in her body.
So important to know.
My book, The End of Mental Illness, could be really helpful.
Well, and there are a lot of things you need to take into consideration. Things like birth control make a difference. They make girls very anxious.
Such a big difference.
It's really important to know all these things, because that becomes really critical to replace things like B vitamins, magnesium, what some of the other things that are depleted by birth control pills, besides serotonin, the big one, obviously. So really important, but that's critical. One thing with our daughter, what we did, we got her into meditating. Before that, she'd been resistant. The word meditation sort of freaked her out, but she got so anxious and depressed during COVID, she finally was willing to learn how to meditate. That was really crucial for her. She started yoga, And then she's a little like me. She's a little high strung. So cycling was great for her, learning how to do cycling and just really do that high intensity type of workout settles her down really nicely.
And also learning not to believe every stupid thing they think,
right?
The mental discipline habits that we talk about.
So she journals for that.
Warrior's way.
Yeah.
So learning to kill the ants with the 5 questions.
Yeah, this is something we know a lot about in our house. So kids with anxiety.
So I hope this has been helpful to you. Send in your comments, your questions, your reviews. We appreciate them deeply. What did you learn in this episode? Write it down, post it, take a picture of it, post it on any of your social media sites, #Brain Warriors Way podcast. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're interested in coming to Amen Clinics, use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.